Hey everyone, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I say welcome back. Maybe this is the first time you've seen one of my shows. If so, welcome. Thanks to everybody for watching. On this episode, it's a cassette episode. I think it's been a while since I've done one of these. This one is on my Queensryche cassette collection, and this one includes some little harder to find cassettes and some that just came out not too long ago. So we'll get to those. So the first Queensryche album, the first release, first EP came out 1983. They put it out independently. This copy is the EMI reissue. It's a US reissue. And it's got the same 4 songs on both sides. Of course, you know, Queensryche fans know when this was issued on CD, they added the Prophecy, so it's actually a 5-song EP. So there's the song titles, and on the back it looks like one long title, but it's the songs are repeated on side 2 for your convenience. So the first full-length Queensryche album, The Warning, 1984. This is a Canadian issue on EMI America. It's actually a Columbia House issue. This is what the Canadian Capitol releases looked like. Columbia House can be indicated by the little number in brackets on the bottom right here. Not one thing inside of it for credits. That's what the cassette looks like. I think I got to thank Bug Campbell for that one, because you don't see this one a lot. Very first Queensryche album I ever owned. I didn't get into them until '93, but the very first one I ever picked up was this, Rage for Order. This is a Canadian cassette on EMI. This too is a Columbia House. Looked very similar in the US and Canada at this time for EMI releases. There's the cassette. The fantastic photos inside of this. And the lyrics, printed very, very small. Breakthrough album, 1988. Operation Mindcrime. This is a Canadian cassette. By now it's EMI Manhattan instead of EMI America. It's actually easier to read the song titles and everything on the cassette than it is on the CD. There's a lot of bleed on the original CD. It makes it very, very hard to read. This copy I've got's got a little tiny tear in it, but that's not a problem. It's got all the lyrics. The lyrics are kind of hard to read on this one too. Not just because of the size, but because of the way that they're written out. It's hard to tell where one song ends and the other begins. Empire, 1990. This is a Canadian cassette. The song titles down that way. Everything on this has like a silver tint to it. Lyrics are quite a bit easier to read on this one. I can still actually make out the lyrics in this one. I'm sad to report that it's true. Kind of an oddball release because you don't normally see it by itself. When I originally found this, I think back in 1995, it was by itself. Originally this came as part of a package with a VHS, and of course later it was issued on DVD, but Operation Live Crime. So they performed all of the Operation Mindcrime album live in concert, and because it didn't really take off until after Empire got big, they did the entire thing as part, I think, as part of the Empire tour, and recorded it. Really great document. That's what I got introduced to, and that's why I realized how great this band actually was. This is a Canadian edition, and you don't see this by itself. This would have only come with the original VHS box, but this is it by itself. Someone just sold it used. EMI has this weird circly logo by now. Right there. And basically it's got the road crew and little credits inside of here. 94. It was 94 before the next Queensryche album was released, and it was Promised Land. This is a US copy. The clear cassette here. Lyrics are quite easy to read on this. There's a good picture of the front cover by itself without any text. An album that got overlooked when it came out. A lot of people don't like it. I happen to really like it. Here in the Now Frontier. You don't see this one all that much, especially in cassette. This is a Canadian cassette. It's their last one for EMI. With USIM artwork. If you saw the recent episode that we did with Ryche fans, you'll know that I thought that would make a good Ryche album cover. You'll have to watch the episode to see which one I mean. Yeah, I always really liked this album from the first time it came out, but a lot of people don't like it. They don't like the dry production, but I think it was quite good. Next one's interesting. It's an American cassette. And speaking of Ryche, when this came out in Canada, it came out on Anthem Records originally, but in the US it was on Atlantic. This is Q2K. Very dark cover. I'll take it out of the case to see if that makes a difference. It really, yeah, it kind of does. Very dark. And this is a Atlantic release. Lyrics kind of hard to read inside this one too. They're kind of smushed together. This was eventually reissued by Rhino Records with some extra songs on it, but not on cassette, I don't think. The next thing I have from Queensryche is the Jeff Tate-led version of Queensryche, and I still think this is quite a good album. And this is one of the first newer albums I remember coming out that was offered on cassette. It was the first time that a new cassette had come out in many, many years, at least for a band that I was following. Frequency Unknown. Printed quite dark compared to the CD and the vinyl, but a really, really good album. Whether or not you consider it a Queensryche album, I think there's a lot of great songs on here. And honestly, the novelty of there being two completely different bands called Queensryche releasing music in the same year was quite appealing, and they both ended up being pretty good albums. Fortunately, what I like about this one is it doesn't include the 4 really, really bad remakes of the older songs. Just got the 10 new songs on it. So that was it for my Queensryche collection for quite a few years until 3 of their 4 recent albums with Todd La Torre and vocals got reissued through Back on Black, which normally does vinyl reissues, but they also do CD reissues, and apparently now they've branched out into cassette issues. Unfortunately, all 3 of these are printed very, very dark. They could have used a little lightening up because it's hard to tell what they are. This is the self-titled album that came out in 2013, the first one with Todd La Torre. Great, great album. And yeah, really, really hard to read the titles on here. And they followed it up with 2015 with an album that was printed dark on all of the formats. I like the album concept, but I again, not quite so dark in the printing because it may not have gone into the printer that way, and I know this after doing a book and talking to Matt about it, how this can happen, but it just came out being very, very hard to make out what is what. Especially the song titles, like, very, very hard to read. Condition Human, another good album. Possibly my favorite of all of them, The Verdict. Now it's got at least a little red in it, so it shows up a little better. But yeah, finally these 3 albums are available on cassette. As of right now, I don't know if they're making the most recent one, Digital Noise Alliance, available on cassette. If they do, I'll probably have to buy it. And I know there's cassette singles and EPs and stuff like that, but am I missing anything else? Because I couldn't find any evidence that things like Tribe and Operation Mindcrime 2 were issued on cassette. Maybe they were in other parts of the world, but that's my Queensryche cassette collection. I'm wondering if any of you out there got those cassette reissues. We got any cassette fans out there, you know? Do people realize that some of these albums, you know, in recent years are available on cassette? I'm curious. Comment below. And thanks everyone for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions.